Diane Campbell has lived, worked, and volunteered in San Anselmo for 19 years, and she has a master's degree in public administration. After losing both of her parents within a short time span and not having their stories documented and preserved, she founded her own business, Homegrown Histories, in 2019. Diane is committed to helping individuals, families, and businesses document and share their personal histories that can be passed down to our future generations. Diane also volunteers with the Marin History Museum as their interviewer for their oral history program.
I am the founder and owner of Homegrown Histories, and I'm a personal historian. And I help people and businesses tell and document their stories. And as she said, I'm also a volunteer with the Marin History Museum. And what I'd like to say is I'm one of those people who, if you ask me to memorize something, I go blank. I completely clam up. So I'm going to be reading from my notes. I hope it won't be too distracting. I don't think it will be, but if I didn't read from my notes, I wouldn't be here. So, and before I begin to talk today, what I'd like to have you all think about, and at least for the people in the room, if by show of hands, I'd like to ask, how many of you have ever been interviewed by a family member or a loved one? Not surprising. Have you ever interviewed somebody else? Oh, excellent. I'm never going to put anyone on the spot, but if you want to share what that was like for you, and if you don't want to share, that's fine too. Okay.
I share.
Oh, great. Okay.
I did oral history on my mother-in-law. It took a long time. It took actually many years. I broke it out into a number of different segments. She grew up right after the Depression. She was one of the first women Marines in World War II. After Guadalcanal, they had lost so many Marines that they opened it up to women. So I wanted to capture that story. And then she's done a lot of other interesting things. But it took a long time. And I'm hoping that by sharing, hearing what other people have to say, I'll get some tips about some other interviews that I like to do.
Yes, absolutely. Did you share it with the Marines? I wonder if they have an arm that collects.
That's a good question. No, I did not. I didn't think of it.
Yeah, might be something to think about.
Yeah.
What an amazing history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have any desire to share?
Yes, I did a video documentary of my mom's life, and it started with interviewing her and going through her photos, and it was for her 80th birthday, and I did it mostly because my dad was one of these larger than life personalities that everybody, he got lots of adulation and notice during his life, and I wanted to also give mom some recognition, so I put together a show that had narration, a whole storyboard, and the photos and videos, and about a 20-minute video. Came out great. And afterwards, my dad said, well, I want a book. So I was like, okay. So I started interviewing him, and I have all the material, and I have it almost all typed up, but it just went off the rails right after he passed away, and then other family things came up, and so I have just this wonderful raw material for his book that I'm hoping to get a little inspiration to get back on the horse again.
Wonderful. Thank you both for sharing.
Can I?
Absolutely.
I've always been interested in ancestry, but once I started watching Finding Your Roots, which is one of my favorite,
So good.
I remember him saying once, "When you die, your stories die."
Okay.
So I started writing a family story about me, because I really regret that I didn't ask my parents when they were alive a lot more questions. I knew a lot from my grandmother. And, in fact, she went to Utah, studied it all the way
Did
back
she?
to Mayflower. Yeah.
Wow, wonderful.
I think family was pioneers.
Well, good for you that you're writing
But,
it on your own.
So this kind of all interests me.
Yes, great.
But this is
Thank
what
you.
I'm doing.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, I'll tell you that there are a lot of people, I'm really surprised that 3 people in here, and in a smaller group too, have done this, because so many people I talk to, they talk about regret not asking their relatives or their loved ones to tell their story, but also to document it. And so I'd like you to think about that for yourselves and for your own family legacies. And to think about what you may regret if you don't record or you don't share your stories. I know that for me personally, I really, really wished that I had asked more questions of my parents. My dad was an amazing storyteller, and he was a World War II vet, and he had so many stories, but we didn't record any except for one. And it was how he came in to be in the possession of a German Luger, a gun. And if you know my father, he is the ultimate pacifist, and yet we have this Luger in our house. But I have nothing of my mom, and she wasn't that much of a storyteller. And so I personally wished that I had asked them detailed questions about their childhood and the decisions they made. And I would love to hear their life lessons. And so these longings that I have, wishing that my parents had documented their stories is really what drove me to start this business and become an oral historian. So what are we going to focus on today? What is personal and oral history and genealogy, because they are different? Why is it important to share your personal history? Why is it important to share your business's story if you own a business? How can you document and share your legacy? Tips and tricks for interviewing, and some sample interview questions to sort of help you get where you need to go. That is a picture of my father and my aunt and my grandmother. Did you know that, Leah?
No.
That's my daughter. So sweet. See, I need to do it too. Okay, so what is personal and oral history? So before I get into the meat of this, please know that I use personal and oral history interchangeably. So if I say one, I mean the other. Oral history is a field of study and a method of gathering, preserving, and interpreting the voices, memories, and perspectives of people and communities in history. It predates the written word and stems from the oral tradition of passing information of importance to the family or tribe to the next generation. It's also considered a primary historical source that we should value as just as accurate, important, and vital as any type of record that can be used to learn about your family history. I think about what you did with you said your mother or your mother-in-law?
Mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law. That's just as vital as any sort of document. Recorded interviews are a tool we can all use to engage with and learn from family members, friends, and community members to capture their unique history in their own words. I'd also like to point out that personal historians are not interested in proving the facts of someone's memory. We're not out to prove whether it's right or wrong because it's a memory, and that in itself makes it important. Also, I want to add that not everything important is preserved in an official document, whether they were lost or destroyed or simply overlooked as being worthy of documentation. And there's a great amount of real, actual history that only our living relatives can teach us about. When we record someone's history, we're also capturing information that's difficult to obtain by other means. These interviews convey someone's personality and may reveal their inner thoughts and motivations. They can also give facts about a family that may not be revealed in formal records. For instance, the telling of a story behind an important family event, or identifying people in pictures that they may be the only ones who still remember. I just want to go back real quickly. I don't know who these people are, but I love this picture. And it totally gives you a sense of who they were. You can tell they really enjoyed each other. What I did find out about this picture was that they were posing, I'm imagining it's in the late 1800s, and they were posing for a picture, and I think we all know nobody smiled in pictures back then, it wasn't done. But they were cracking up, and there's just something to me very special, and it tells you so much, just by how much they're enjoying each other. Personal historians focus on the value of knowing where, and even more importantly, who you come from, so that you, your children, and future generations can better know themselves and become more aware of, and hopefully end destructive cycles of behavior and continue the positive and productive ones and connect meaningfully with others. One of the things that I hear is, oh, I'm not that interesting. Oh, I didn't do anything of interest. And my response is, respectfully, that's not the point. Because most of us don't lead these lives that are worthy of some blockbuster movie or some best-selling book, right? What's important is that you're sharing who you are with the people that love you. And that is so important because it helps inform who they are. Okay, so now that I've given you some information about personal history, what is genealogy? So genealogy is the study of family origins and history, and it traces the lines of your ancestors and descendants. Genealogists compile lists of ancestors, which they arrange in pedigree charts, which are family trees. Genealogists examine public records such as marriage certificates, census records, newspapers, wills, deeds, church records, and they also look at materials a family may provide, like diaries and photo albums, home movies, family Bibles. And they look to oral history as a crucial part of their research, as it provides context to that archival information that they're gathering. Both personal historians and genealogists care about where and when people lived. They care about biographies, relationships, activities, achievements, and their motivations. In my work as a personal historian, I've found that some people are intrigued by their origins, but aren't as interested as the archival research about names and dates and branches in the family tree. They want stories and life lessons that can be found through the telling of personal histories. And that's what I focus on, and that's what other oral historians focus on. Personal historians help people share their life stories, poignant times in their lives, life lessons, memorials, and businesses tell their founding stories. We're focused on preserving people's legacy for the future. So why is it important to share your story? And I'm going to read this quote in yellow. Genealogists and personal historians love a good tree metaphor. And so this quote I particularly like. And it's, without the knowledge of our past history and culture, we're like a tree without roots and will be unable to grow and flourish. Research found that there are significant benefits for children and their sense of self. They had higher self-esteem and believed their families function more successfully. Hearing their family stories gave the children a sense of their history and a way to connect across generations. It gave them a strong sense of who they are in the world. And family stories help families pass on values, experiences, traditions, and important life lessons to the next generation. Negative stories can actually be more important than the uplifting ones. Families often shield children from the truth, but negative stories help to foster emotional resilience. They feed into the idea that it's important to let children hear about relatives overcoming difficulty. And just as a tree can't ignore its roots, or it won't get nourishment, the same is true for us even if the roots weren't as healthy as we may have wished for. For those of us who may have had dysfunction in their families, by understanding where the dysfunction originated and how it was handed down, we can decide not to pass it down and change our family behavior patterns. By finding out where we came from can give meaning to our lives and really help us better understand who we are. There are positive impacts on mental health in older adults. Gerontologists found that reminiscing can improve the confidence of older adults. They found that storytelling can lead to higher mental stimulation, improved memory, deeper social connections, and increased activeness. By recalling how they overcame past struggles, older adults may be able to better confront new challenges and also may be able to help forgive themselves for past mistakes. If you own a business, it has a story and you should share it. An effective way to communicate purpose, the whys of what you do, is by sharing your founding story. How and why your business or organization or nonprofit was formed. What passions led you to risk wealth and maybe even your health to start their company. Sharing any barriers and challenges you encountered along with your company's values, and even personal stories about your business, repeated over and over again, helps you stay core to your organization's founding principles and can provide daily decision-making guidance. It also can provide motivation to your employees when they understand why the work that you do is important and meaningful. It can also be a great tool for hiring employees to ensure that they share your core beliefs. If you can communicate to them what your founding principles were, and if they have changed or not changed, and why, both you and they will have a greater understanding if they're a good fit for your company. You'll want them to know, you'll want your customers to know who you and your business are and why. Okay, so how can you tell your story? There are 3 basic ways, but with lots and lots of variation in between. So the first one, obviously, is the written word. And when I talk about the written word, I am mostly referring to memoir. You can write your own memoir, obviously, in your own voice. And there are classes over the internet. The College of Marin offers classes on memoir writing. And there's also online companies that can help you do this. I don't know if any of you are familiar with, there's one where they'll send you a question every week for a year, and then you return those, you answer them, and then they compile them into a book. Yeah, it's kind of cool. You can also hire someone, a memoir writer, to write a story for you. And for businesses, you can create your founding story in short form and use that as part of your advertising and marketing plans. There's another option in addition to memoir, and I hate the name of it, but it's called an ethical will. And what this does is it allows you to, and it's in a much shorter form, it's more like a letter, and it allows you to express gratitude to your loved ones. You can share your values, your wisdom, life lessons, and actually what a lot of people do is they will explain the reasoning behind the decisions they made in their wills. So that's another option. And then there's audio recordings. And this is obviously where you're telling your story in your own voice. And the value here is that your loved ones can hear the narrator's voice when they're no longer able to tell their story. And there's so many options for this now. You can use your iPhone. You can purchase an audio recorder. They're not very expensive at all. You can have a friend, or you can record yourself. And of course, you can hire a personal historian, and they have the expertise to craft the questions and comfort with interviewing, and they'll have professional equipment. And then lastly, there's video and film recording. And again, the value here is that you're not just capturing the audio, but you're also capturing an image. And I can say for me, when I have this video of my dad describing how he got the Luger, it's great to see, him, not only hear his voice, but to see him. And again, you can use your iPhone. If you have a camera, there's all the video capabilities now with cameras. Or again, you can hire a personal historian and they can help you tell your story, and they'll bring professional lighting and sound and video equipment. I'll say also what I've seen is that when you hire someone, you are really loath to procrastinate because you have this contract and you have said, yes, I will do it. I've also found that my clients in particular, they will open up a lot more and will answer a lot more questions than if they were filming themselves or having a family member interview them. So how do you start this process? The first thing that you want to do is you want to talk with the person that you want to interview and really explain to them, why is it important to you? Why is it important for you to have them document their story? I would share with them what you hope to gain from it. And you can also use what you're learning here today, some of the research that has been, that I've been talking about. Then you want to describe the process. It's really important that people know what to expect. And so it's certainly going to vary by anyone's needs, by your needs, by the narrator's needs. But first you're going to want to create a list of questions. And you're going to want to share the types of questions that you're going to be asking. Sometimes I have clients that really want to see every question beforehand. And if that sets them at ease, absolutely. But typically what I'll do is I'll let them know that I'm starting with biographical questions. I may ask questions about their education, about their adult life, their work, their family, and I'll let them know that I'll be getting into deeper questions that can evoke emotion. Beforehand, I like to ask people to review names and dates. What you don't want to do is get into the interview situation and then the person you're interviewing really struggle and feel regret about not thinking about it beforehand. I ask others for input. So typically for me, I'll have a child of someone who has hired me to interview their parent. And so that adult child will give me input about what stories they want to hear, and I'll make sure that they ask their siblings and other loved ones. Because what the narrator may think is important and what they remember may be really different than what their loved ones want to know. And sometimes that'll also help trigger their memory for other stories. Scheduling the interview, one of the things that I've learned is that for me, I'm really good at 10 a.m., but a lot of other people aren't. So really make sure, ask your narrator is the one that you really want to make sure is the person that is comfortable with the time and date. And then you want to make sure that whether you're interviewing someone over Zoom or you're in their living room, you want to make sure that they're in the most comfortable spot that they can find, wherever their comfortable chair is. Because again, it's about their comfort. What I want to stress is, I'm on the bullet point of editing and review. When you're done with the interview, you may do editing, you may not, but it's really important that you share the interview with the person, with the narrator. And the reason why is they need to know that they're in control. And if they have said something that now they regret, it is absolutely their right to ask you to delete it. So I also, before I start an interview, I also let the narrator know that this is their story. And if there is anything that I ask that they don't feel comfortable with, they tell me and we move on to the next question. Okay, 2 important rules. Avoid asking yes or no questions. And the reason for this is you're going to get a yes or no answer. So you want to be asking the who, what, when, where, and why. I also like to ask, describe for me. So a really, simplistic question would be, did you like high school? Well, they're going to either say yes or no, or sort of. But if I can say to them, can you describe for me your high school experience? Then it opens it up and they can talk about what their experience was like. Swim in the shallow waters before going deep. What that means is you really want to start with questions that are easy, biographical, when were you born, where were you born, who were your parents? It's really essential that we help the narrators ease into the process. You know, with anything new, you don't want to be struck with something that's going to evoke a lot of emotion. And so when you can ask questions that lead up to the more difficult, controversial ones, it makes a big, big difference. Okay, that's me and my sister. Oh, the 70s. Tips and tricks. So the first is to have a really clear goal for what you want to learn. And I just talked about that. It's really thinking about why this is important to you. You want to prepare questions ahead of time. It can be easy to think, oh, this is my grandparent, or this is my sister, or whomever, and think that you'll be able to do it on the fly. And I highly, highly recommend against it. Again, send questions in advance. Practice asking the questions. It's incredible, you know, you think it's the easiest thing, and then you start stumbling. And you can feel very frustrated. And you're going to stumble, but if you can do a little practicing, it does make a difference. Photos, huge conversation starters. So if you have a reluctant narrator, bring out the photo album, start asking questions. And that's a really great way of greasing the skids and really helping them get comfortable. Ask one question at a time. You don't want the narrator to have to feel like they've got to keep track of everything. Use follow-up questions. So the reality is you are going to have a list of questions, but there is nothing wrong. In fact, there's everything right with listening and then asking a follow-up question so that they can either provide more information or clarify what you're not understanding. This one is a tricky one for me. The interview is not a dialogue. I'm really chatty, but it's not about me. It's about their story. And so I let them know ahead of time that I'll be using facial expressions, I'll be nodding my head, but it's not a dialogue, it's truly an interview. Don't let periods of silence fluster you. This can be a tough one. So silence can indicate that they're thinking about a name or a date, or they're thinking about the details of a story, but it can also mean that they're feeling emotional. And if you can try not to stray away from that, because it can feel uncomfortable to you as well, let the silence linger. Don't interrupt a good story. That's another problem I have. Because I want to go, oh, me too. Also, don't challenge accounts that you think might be inaccurate. Remember, these are people's memories. And that's what you're there for, is to record their memory, not to sleuth out whether they're right or wrong. I like to interview without anyone else in the room. I have done interviews where people are there, but what I find is that, one, it's very distracting for the narrator to know that they have an audience. I also have found that they're much more willing to go deep when nobody's watching. Keep the interview time to 1 to 2 hours. I've gone much longer, and it's been grueling on both me and the narrator. And what you find is that it is tiring to recount your life. And if it means that you need to schedule another day, then you do that. I have a new client that I'm interviewing on Friday. We've scheduled 2 days because I have a feeling that we're going to be going over, and I don't want to tax her, nor do I want to tax myself. It's not fun. The last one, save your work. It is excruciating to lose the contents of an interview. And I'll share with you my very first interview I ever did. My videographer left the film in his car, and it was broken into, and everything was stolen. And I could have cried, the narrator could have cried, so never again. Never again has that happened. In fact, what I do is immediately While I'm at my narrator's house, I'm saving it. I don't leave their house until it's done, and that's either on video or it's on recording. I'm not a writer, so it wouldn't be for their memoir. Okay. Sample questions. The first three are questions that can lead you to ask more about parents and grandparents and where they came from and more about their roots. So, did your parents tell you anything about the day that you were born? And if so, what? Who were you nicknamed? Who were you named after and why? Did you have a nickname and where did it come from? So, for example, for number 2, I'm gonna break that one up. I'm not gonna ask them both because sometimes when you ask who somebody is named after, they can give you a longer response. Who do you most resemble in your family? And I ask this both from a looks perspective as well as a personality perspective. Leah and I look nothing alike. Well, actually, some people say we do. She's gonna kill me. But we have the same sense of humor. So when somebody interviews you, that's what you're gonna tell them.
Noted, I'll remember.
Noted. Okay, and the next 4 can lead you to ask more about their life as a child, young adult, their education, profession, marriage, divorce, children, etc. So, first one is please describe the home you grew up in. And this one, I'll tell you, I either ask that or I ask people to describe what their bedroom looked like. I have gotten the most fantastic responses, and it really gives you a wonderful glimpse into what their surroundings were like when they were young. What did you enjoy doing as a child or teen, and did you have a favorite activity? What was it? What kind of student were you? What was your high school experience like? When did you leave home, and what were the circumstances? And then the final 3 questions are meant to dig deep. You can ask more questions about who they are as people and why they made the decisions they made in their life. These questions are really about getting to know who they were and who they are now. These deep questions can often be the catalyst for your loved ones to learn more about themselves and for you to gain insight into who you are too. So the first one, tell me about a memorable moment in your life, a time you would never forget. Would you do it over again and why? And this really allows people to think about both positive and negative stories, right? It doesn't have to all be blue skies. What is your biggest regret in life and why? For your children, grandchildren, and future generations, what are some of the life lessons that you'd want to pass on to them? If I can leave you with a few closing thoughts that I'd like you to remember and hopefully act on, is that sharing and documenting your personal history is how we pass down our legacies, who we are to future generations. We know ourselves better by knowing the details of who came before us and how they lived. There are multi-generational benefits to sharing your stories. Your children and grandchildren will know who they came from, which bolsters their sense of self and their place in the world. They will gain insight into how to overcome challenges and will know the values and life lessons of their elders that will help guide them as they become citizens in the world. Older adults gain a higher mental stimulation, improved memory, and deeper social connections through their storytelling. Their reminiscing helps to confront new struggles and can lead to forgiveness for past mistakes. Anyone can tell and document their stories. There are several options available to you, and you can have as little or as much assistance as you'd like. Be gentle with your narrator. Set them at ease by asking them biological questions first, and by making sure that they know that they are in control of what they want to cover. It's their story, and they get to decide